Hey, Shane McMurray from the Wedding Report. In this episode, I interview Beth from Charleston Wedding Studio in Charleston, South Carolina. So enjoy. All right. So, Beth, first let's talk about your business. I
Okay.
want to talk about this, and then I want to talk about what goes into the work that you do.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of times, I hear from other vendors that couples just care about prices sometimes. Uh, and it's not that they just care about price, but they're looking for value, right? It's not that they don't care about the value. I think they're just like, those are the first things that come to mind, right? Like, let me get a price, let me get some things, and then does that fit within me? So I want to understand what goes into the work that you do so we can educate, and share back
Okay.
with others to say, look, this is the work I put into what I do. And then we'll talk about some other stuff around for couples. And then we'll talk about business itself, the business part of it. And then we'll talk about some stories and who knows, wherever this goes. So,
Okay.
all
All
right.
right.
So first, tell me about your business, where you're located, your website, all that good stuff.
Okay. My name is Beth LeonGuerrero. I own Charleston Wedding Studio. It's actually very interesting. I just rebranded a couple of days ago, so
Oh, wow.
so sometimes it takes a little bit to get used to that. I owned my business that was called Wildflowers Inc. for 12 years here in Charleston, South Carolina.
Mhm.
And we just branded to Charleston Wedding Studio because not only do we do floral designs, but we do full service planning,
Right.
lighting, decor, fabric projects, wedding design, styling. So we do a little bit more than flowers. So that's where the branding came in.
Nice,
And
nice. Did you find yourself doing more stuff like that and you go, why are we just flowers? We need to probably put more around it. Is that why you think?
So when I first started the business, Wildflowers Inc. 12 years ago, it was a unique situation where I was kind of one of the first home-based floral studios.
Okay.
There's probably nearly 100, if not more, in my area right now. I actually run a support group for wedding florists in the
Nice.
area.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the thing. We need support,
Yep.
and
Yep.
it is the flower side of it is particularly stressful.
Sure.
Um, and so when I started, I was one of the first in-home studios. And I wasn't quite sure at the time where the business was going to take me. And we were doing full service, and I just finally got around to, and by full service, I mean the planning
Right.
or day of coordinating lighting projects, fabric projects. So it just, the brand and the name change was a long time coming.
Yeah. It just made sense, right? For today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So what's your website?
It is charlestonweddingstudio.com.
Nice. All right. Excellent. Okay. So tell me about um, I guess we could pick one topic. It doesn't have to be everything because that's a lot, but, right? Let's pick maybe flowers, right? And talk about what goes into that process. Like if I need flowers for my wedding, like I come to you, how does that work? What do we do? And then what do you have to do to put in the work, right? To get that there and to set that up and to make sure that they're, you know what I mean? The whole process. Let's talk about that. What
Right.
goes
I think that's a great place to start because flowers in particular, wedding flowers, I don't think clients recognize how much labor goes into it. And there is this misconception that it costs more or we charge more, we charge because it's flowers. And it's like, yeah, because we're spending, 60 hours more of work, probably on the computer side, email side, consultation side, and working up the proposal and figuring out recipes, and then you want to make adjustments. Revisions are a huge things. Clients want to cut off a certain amount of money and you're trying to shave here and there. So there's a lot that goes into just working on the proposal and getting a quote to a client.
So would you
It's not
say,
cut and dry.
60 hours go into a whole deal?
So maybe not the proposal, but I'm just saying approximately before we even get to the wedding, there's a lot of hours time depending on the scope of the wedding.
Sure. Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk through it, right? All right. So I've contacted you. I got to do this proposal thing. You go back and forth, right? You spend a bunch of time working through those details. What's next?
Right. So that alone could have been 5 hours, just working through the emails, getting the details that the client needs, putting them in a format. Even there's a couple of great programs out there that help wedding florists now with recipe generation and counting the stems and doing that proposal, but they still are very time consuming. You're wanting to make sure that there are images on the proposal that accurately reflect back to the clients what they want to see in terms of their wedding. And then there's possibly site visits, depending on your familiarity with the venue or the client's budget. Perhaps they're wanting a large scale installation, so you're going to take measurements, and so the hours do start to add up, and then you are spending time doing revisions because whether it's a budgetary issue or they've changed their mind on some things. I do try to have in a contract a limitation on the number of revisions they can make aside from quantity. Yeah, aside from quantity adjustments. But even if they're making quantity adjustments, you have to take that into consideration. If all of a sudden you're having to buy a couple of packs of a certain rose versus maybe buying that rose in bulk at a 250 box. It's like, okay, how does that impact the pricing?
Yeah, sure, right.
There's just a lot of details that go into the proposal process and the revisions. And then of course you're placing your flower order with the wholesaler. So then you're communicating with, and it's very rarely a single wholesaler. A lot of times you are looking across the board at a variety of different wholesalers to also get the best price. And then not all wholesalers will carry the same product.
Wow.
And then there's your hard goods. You have to calculate what hard goods you're needing. What do you not have in stock? What are you having to order specifically for this client? Do you need new candles? Just the whole list of supplies and items that you need. When you get, okay, so it's wedding week. And when we haven't even, this is where I'm saying all of the hours have come in and we're not even at the wedding. It's wedding week. We're going to the airport to pick up the flowers, and we've got boxes and boxes of flowers. We're having to process the flowers. We're having to, there was one time, I think it took three of us, I want to say 8 or 9 hours. There were so many flowers just to cut the flowers and tend to them in a manner in which each flower has a different way it needs to be taken care of, and put it in treated water. Decide which ones go in the cooler, don't go in the cooler, and then you're pulling all the hard goods and prepping all the hard goods. And then you're having to figure out the delivery logistics. This is even before you've started designing. Okay, what team members are going to be taking what vehicles with which flowers. Perhaps the bridal party is in one location. They need their bouquets there. Ceremony might be in another location. Reception might be in another location. So there's figuring out the delivery logistics. Do we need a rental vehicle? Do we have enough in-house vehicles to handle the staff, handle the supplies that we're taking? Oh, so no, we don't. So now we have to go get a, so, we have to work into our schedule to go pick up another rental vehicle.
Wow.
And again, that's before we've even started designing the wedding.
Wow. Wow.
And then, so that, yeah, there's a little bit that goes into it.
Yeah, just a little bit. And so
Yeah.
that's the week.
I'm sure I missed something.
I'm sure, right? I mean, but when you're in it, right, you know what to do, right? You've done it for so many years. It's like, I know what to do. I got it. But that's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So, so tell me, you know, for a typical wedding with all of those logistics, I mean, how much does that run me? Like, how much would it cost me if I'm going to do a wedding?
So I would say on the smaller weddings, the florals around this area, typically 3,000, 3,500 for just, lots of greenery, very organically styled bouquets, not a lot of premium blooms.
Sure.
To 10,000 or more when you start getting into 15,000, 20,000 when you're talking about these huge installations.
Oh yeah.
So we're hanging large floral arrangements and from rafters and
Yeah.
huge garlands and trees and just anything that gets me up on a ladder is going to cost extra.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, just at $3,500, right? Just what you talked about that's a significant amount of work that goes into even a small event, right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously that's scaling. So some of the examples I was saying where there was 3 of us and it took 3 of us 9 hours to process the flowers, that's going to be the larger.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. But still, I mean, there's quite a bit of work that goes into it. I mean, that's a lot. So if you, what specific advice would you give couples if you were to give them some advice about the flower part of it, the decorations and stuff? Like, what specific advice would you give them?
So I think it comes advice that they need from the very beginning when working with their overall budget is establishing that budget, being realistic in their expectations for the part of the country, the demographic in which they're planning their wedding, and just making sure they set their priorities. Is food and beverage their priority? Or maybe it's a very high-end photographer, or maybe it is flowers and they just want it to be just lush and, a huge wow factor when they walk in. So I think as long as they're setting their priorities, have realistic expectations, and are honest with all of the vendors that they're working with about their budgets, then the vendors can also help guide and manage them what they can expect within that parameter, the kind of line up with the vision.
That's great advice. That's really good advice. So let's talk a little bit about business side of this.
Okay.
And, so for business, what's working well for you right now?
I think finally having worked on myself. I know that it's kind of weird, but I think that finally taking care of myself and finally working from the inside out has transformed my business. So working on my own health, my own wellness, my own mindset has allowed for me to be just super productive in my business, and just working from the inside out, knowing your own worth. And I think the better you take care of yourself, the more you recognize your worth, and the more that will translate to your clients when you're working with them.
That's awesome. I mean, congratulations for figuring that out. I think we're all still trying to figure it out.
It only took a couple of years. I've been in the industry for nearly 30 years now. Having worked for other people, but now that I've owned my own business for so long and actually work with others, coaching others in the business. Once I found that out, I just wanted to shout it from the rooftops, is that your clients aren't going to value you if you don't.
Hey, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So on the flip side though, what's not working well right now in business?
Whew. I think that it's pretty easy to get overwhelmed with all of the systems. When I first started this, we sat down with clients. We had a conversation in person. It was probably a local girl, whereas now 90% of my clients are from out of town. We typed up a proposal and mailed it to them.
Wow.
Waited a couple of weeks, called them on their landline, waited for a check to come, and now I'm just like, I have a phone conversation. I email them an online portal. I get a notification on my phone that a Venmo payment has been made. And it can definitely get a little overwhelming, all of the different technologies and processes, not just keeping up with them, but it always seems there's always a new thing. It's like, okay, are we using the best CRM program? Are we, maximizing all the technologies for our clients?
Right.
We have an online portal to help track their planning and their budgeting. This is on the wedding planning side of things. And so and it's not that it's not working, it's that it can be a little overwhelming.
Sure. Well, and then you got to integrate these things, and there's 14 different things you need to do to make things work. I've got one application that serves as my business phone. I've got another one for these conversations. I've got a whole separate application to do calendar stuff, and and then one to do email. And so, it gets there's a lot of different things, right? And then, I get it totally. And you got to keep track of it. And I'm a tech guy, right? And there's like,
so that's your thing.
Yeah, I know. So, I get it. I totally get that.
For those of us who are more artistic and not techies, it is definitely very challenging. And it can also be very easy to lose focus.
Sure. Yeah. Really quickly, right?
Yeah. It's like, oh, I meant to, do that social post, and then all of a sudden I'm, liking, Baby Yoda costume.
Yeah, and I'm out of time, and I've got to go to sleep, and I know. It happens. So for business, what specific advice would you have for businesses? Like you and I are going to retire someday, right? So those coming behind us are going to take over the business. What specific advice would you leave for them?
Aside from the advice that I already gave about taking care of yourself, I think being authentic, really understanding your strengths, understanding your weaknesses, and being who you are. I'm not trying to. There's a perfect client for every wedding vendor, and you don't want the client that's not made for you. You don't want the client that's not a good fit. And I think that if you are not yourself, if you are trying too hard to be who you think you're supposed to be, or if you're caught up on social media and looking a little too closely at what competitors are doing, you're going to lose your way. So being yourself is the best way to authentically connect with the clients you were meant to work with.
Great. That's great advice. All right, so now I want to ask you, what's the worst wedding story or business story that you got for me?
I can't. I kind of. There are some that we really cannot talk about here
Sure.
in this forum. Um,
The ones that
uh,
you can talk about, what's the worst one that you can talk about?
um, I think. Well, especially open bars and wedding guests. There's always a lot of drunken debauchery. Um, And so I don't know if it makes for the worst wedding stories or the funniest, but there's definitely, there's wedding guests falling on their face. There's wedding guests falling into the marsh. There's wedding guests taking potty breaks, in the woods. So, girls, not just guys.
Wow.
So I don't know that they're the worst. I think the worst things that can happen at a wedding are not necessarily the ones that I'm laughing at. It's probably when there are people at the wedding, whether it's, unfortunately, sometimes it's family. Occasionally it's the bride or groom themselves. And sometimes it's wedding guests, but when anybody is not there in a loving, supporting role for the couple.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the worst wedding stories are those where these people were really ugly, whether they were ugly to staff or vendors or to the bride and groom, or bride and bride, or groom and groom. So I still sometimes say bride and groom out of habit, but those, and then occasionally from the business standpoint, it truly breaks my heart. It's rare, but when it happens, it hurts us all. When a wedding vendor has been unscrupulous or even unlawful, or not followed through with their contract, or not done. So probably one of the worst things that happened here locally was there was a wedding vendor, and he had developed a huge business. He had an entertainment, transportation, and one day it was like he was done. He just shut off, stopped showing up, and you're having to, you're having to deal with the fallout from that at your wedding.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile on Facebook, he's at a wedding. He was supposed to show up, and he's at home cooking s'mores. He just really checked out. And it hurts us all, because we do care so much and we work so hard. So some of the worst stories are not just what the clients have done to us, but sometimes what we've done to ourselves, and what other vendors have hurt the reputation of the wedding industry as a whole.
Yeah. So, okay. So the last one will be like, what's your best story? And I was looking for more like a personal experience story. Like, hey, this
Oh.
is the best. This is the best thing that happened to me, or to at a wedding. It was so, loving or exciting or whatever, right? Or to your business, right? The best story you got.
So there's so many best. Almost every wedding is truly amazing. I'm particularly grateful when clients are just so overwhelmed with appreciation, that they thank me at some point during the wedding. I had a groom,
Pretty awesome.
had it happen a few times, where they actually incorporate words to me in their toast or their welcome speech.
Wow.
And that's really overwhelming. And I think the friendships that we make with the couples, and receiving heartfelt cards and thank yous at the end of it, and sometimes they'll send pictures of them with me, and those are just always amazing, and that never gets old. And I also love when there was an unfortunate time where it was the weather was it was like, okay, zero chance of rain, so we were executing an outdoor setup, and this rain just really just
Out
like
of nowhere.
formed instantly, came out of nowhere, and just every vendor on the vendor team, we were moving tables, we just, and that I just truly felt like it was a community and that we were working together for the client. And
Yeah,
so
that's
that was
awesome.
a particularly good time.
That's a
And
good
I
story.
just, yeah, yeah. And instead of being like, not my problem,
Right?
you know,
Yeah, we're
it
all
is
in this
everybody.
together. We're there for them, right? I mean, that's the whole purpose, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so those are some of the best stories, really just heartwarming. The couples, the clients, the vendors, when everybody is just so, gracious and work work together, and we have happy clients.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, thanks for checking out this episode. I hope that you found it helpful. Please share it with other people. Also, if you're getting married or you work in the wedding industry, I would love to interview and share your information with other people. Send me a text 520-399-8580 or shoot me an email at letschat@wedding.report.